Son productos IMSS. Sí, nos ayudaron algunos expertos fuera del IMSS, pero nace en el IMSS, para la gente del IMSS, para ustedes. Creo que ahí está el tiempo. Como siempre, doctora Arriaga, le agradezco. Que Dios me los bendiga.
Agradecemos la participación de nuestro conferencista y le solicitamos permanecer en el estrado, ya que a continuación la doctora Ana Carolina Sepúlveda le hará entrega de un reconocimiento por su participación. Continuemos con ese fuerte aplauso para despedir a nuestro conferencista. Les recordamos que después de cada conferencia magistral, si es que el tiempo lo permite, contaremos con un espacio para preguntas y respuestas. Les solicitamos levantar la mano y nuestro personal de apoyo les proporcionará un micrófono. Ahora daremos paso a la conferencia Aplicación de Análisis basados en sensores de movimiento para cuantificar el dolor e incomodidad, por el doctor Mark Wolff, jefe global de la práctica de analítica en salud del SAS, a quien invito por favor a pasar al estrado y les pido recibirlo con un fuerte aplauso.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días. And that is the limit of my Spanish. So I hope you will indulge me and allow me to proceed with my presentation in English, although my slides are in Spanish. So I hope that is a good balance. So hello. It is a wonderful pleasure to be here to share some of the exciting and innovative work that I'm able to do at SAS in terms of developing and prototyping very quickly technology that takes advantage of advanced machine learning and available sensors for improving any number of health-related opportunities, particularly in clinical decision support. Today, I want to talk to you about a project that I did with some colleagues where we wanted to take a very inexpensive and powerful motion sensor available in many devices that we have with us today, to take that device and try to understand a very important clinical endpoint, to do it very quickly, but to do it with great precision and power, and to take advantage of machine learning capabilities that are now available to all of us. So with that, if we could go to the next slide. I think that's for me. So I want to introduce the project, first explaining what we do know. We were interested in analyzing human motion. There are many, many researchers and a great deal of scientific literature that explains how humans move, how they walk, how they sit, how they go up and down steps. That information is very valuable to clinicians to understand any number of disease and pathologies, and to understand whether a particular treatment is having an effect on a disease and a pathology. Often, technological analysis of motion can be very complicated and can be very expensive, involving many sensors and many different machines in order to understand how a human moves relative to some pathology. But today, there are available many, many powerful sensors, specifically motion sensors, that can be used to monitor how the body behaves in space and time. Those sensors are inexpensive, and they're available almost everywhere. In fact, most of us with any kind of smartphone have a very rich set of inertial momentum sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes, magnetometers, and so on. The objective of this study was to take advantage of a personal smartphone, the sensors in the phone, and address an issue of pathology, specifically pain and discomfort. Motion and walking, as you can see here, is very, very well defined mathematically. We understand mathematically how the human body moves. But that understanding is quite complex and quite detailed mathematically. How can we deliver that understanding of motion efficiently, quickly, and inexpensively, yet still provide valuable clinical insight? Our objectives were to develop this technique to address several very important aspects. One, patient safety. For example, can a sensor inform us when a drug is or is not having an effect relative to how we move and how we compensate? Can we understand whether we have too much of the drug or not enough of the drug? This is what I mean by safety. The efficacy of the drug. If I give you a drug and a sensor that monitors some critical endpoint, can I tell if the drug is actually working? Specifically, a pain medicine. There are now many opportunities to insert sensors to pain medicine that is delivered in a patch. So we've seen transdermal application of analgesics. We can introduce into that patch a sensor, and the sensor and the drug can work together to understand whether a patient is or is not improving. We have many examples of sensors being used to understand whether a drug was actually taken, or compliance. One of the greatest challenges is not just diagnosing and treating a disease, but rather making sure that the patient actually takes the drug. In the US, for example, about 30% of prescriptions go unfilled. That means that 3 out of 10 people are not fulfilling the prescription that their doctor told them to take. Recently, there was a story where the first ever pill with a sensor was approved, and when you swallow this pill, a sensor is activated and actually sends a signal saying that the pill indeed was swallowed. And this again, confirmation. Quality of life. Often in chronic disease and over long periods of time, it is difficult to tell whether the management of a chronic disease, the drugs, the therapies, are having a longer-term effect. Can sensors serve to monitor patients over time and address issues of quality of life? With a motion sensor, for example, one could understand how much one is walking, how much one is lying down, sitting in front of the TV, so on and so forth. All of these important quality of life measures that will influence how a physician treats their patient. And finally, related, rehabilitation. How can motion sensing support and improve the progress of rehabilitation following an accident or some other injury? So, let me begin with what we did and what our experiment was. It was quite simple. The iPhone that I have in my pocket, as many smartphones, as I've mentioned before, contains many, many powerful sensors. Those sensors can monitor motion in many, many different parameters. Accelerometer, XYZ plane, gyroscope in 6 different channels, magnetometer, speed, orientation, many, many, many channels of data. Those data can be collected at a very high frequency. This means that we can have a very, very large set of information upon which to do machine learning. Why machine learning? We have a complex set of data with a very important time component, and we want to look for relationships and patterns that are not obvious to the human mind, but are relevant to a clinical outcome. The plan was to take an iPhone, place it on the upper shoulder area, a sensor. What we want is simplicity. The iPhone placed there provides an ideal platform where a variety of motion can be sensed. Rotation, bending, angle, how one walks, how one rotates, and so on. For $4.99, some are free, some are more expensive, one can buy an app on the Apple App Store. Those apps are incredibly powerful software that connect to all the sensors in the iPhone and allow all those data to be streamed and collected. So we have an iPhone, this is our recording device. We have an inexpensive app that actually collects all the data from the sensors and puts them into a single table. Now we are ready to analyze those data. But before we can analyze those data, we need to make sure that we the appropriate test. The experiment is quite simple. We will look at several key clinically relevant parameters that often physicians look at when examining a person with potential pain or discomfort related to any number of diseases. In this case, we want to look at walking in a straight line, we want to look at sitting up and down from a chair, and we want to look at walking up and down steps. In this presentation, we will focus on walking in a straight line. We will record information from an individual where the iPhone is placed on their shoulder, and then apply any number of analytic processes to try to understand whether we could use that information to identify a similar condition in a new patient. The protocol involved sampling data at 100 hertz, so 100 measurements per second as the individual was walking in a straight line from anywhere to 10 to 15 seconds. So basically we put the phone on the person and asked them to do this. Those data were recorded and stored. Often we ask people to do this multiple times, and we ask different kinds of people to do this. The data that we collected were very consistent with what can be seen in the scientific literature for human gait analysis, human walking. You can see that it's very cyclical, it's very periodic, and it produces a very clean, detailed stream of numbers related across 12 parameters, acceleration and the gyroscope having 6. I apologize, there's a lag. Okay, so we see the data. Once those data were collected, we were able to take advantage of many, many very sophisticated mathematical modeling and machine learning techniques. And when I say machine learning, what I mean is that the data that were presented to the computer presents certain patterns through time. What we can do is use techniques such as decision trees, neural networks, any number of regression analyses. As you can see here, I attempted to use about 7 different techniques, and I was able to compare those techniques. The analyses occur here, the source data are here, the algorithm in the model that is created is output here. These are individuals that we want to test. What is important to know, when we say machine learning, what is the machine learning? In this case, the machine wanted to learn how I walk, specifically me. I suffer from psoriatic arthritis, which means I have a significant amount of discomfort and pain in my hips and my knees. When I have pain medicine, when I'm feeling well, I will walk in a very normal straight line. I will demonstrate. That is a nice normal walk for me. When I wake up in the morning and I haven't taken any medicine, I walk about like this. My knees hurt, my hips hurt, I'm oscillating, I'm leaning forwards, I'm compensating. My upper body is compensating for where the pain is occurring in my joints. I wore the sensor on my body and walked normally multiple times, and I allowed the computer to record the pattern of my normal walk. Then I waited until I was quite sore and in some amount of pain. I put the sensor on and I walked back and forth several times. What the machine learned was the difference between those two walks. Mathematically, using these techniques, the machine found patterns between the acceleration in the 3 axes, between the gyroscopic movement. Basically, it looked for relationships between how I oscillate, how I move, what speed I'm going at, all of those parameters. And I did this over and over until the machine told me that the models, the algorithms, the mathematical equations were able to identify one or the other walk. I apologize for the delay. So what happened, I'm waiting to show you the results of the modeling and how mathematically the models could distinguish between the two walks. Okay. So is this me or? Oh, I'm giving away the fun part. Are you controlling this? It doesn't seem to have an effect. Oh, over there? Okay. Okay, so we have a problem there, so I'll talk through it. We can tell mathematically what patterns the software has determined and how those patterns match the two different walks. You literally save that equation, that mathematical equation, and put it on one side and say, this is the equation that defines a normal walk. On the other side, the equation that defines the arthritic walk. So, what you didn't see was just a bunch of mathematical figures and graphs to show how good the models predict. And the model we chose was 95% accurate in distinguishing between the two walks. So if I tested a person walking, 95% of the time it would identify whether that person was walking like me normal or walking like me in pain. So I was very lucky at work. I had some colleagues, and I had a nice, healthy young man, and I said, I know you don't look like me, you don't walk like me, but let me have you walk with the sensor, and then let me use the algorithm to test whether you're a healthy or arthritic young man. And Alex, as you can see over there, scored 75% like a normal walk. This is very good. I was hoping that the model would recognize normal walking. Larry was about to have knee surgery. He was 2 days before knee surgery, and I asked him to walk, even though he was in pain. You can see that Larry scored 87% like me when I walk very stiff in the morning. Good news, the model is actually identifying and giving a probability to people based on the machine learning what it learned. It learned that somebody who's about to have knee surgery walks like an arthritic and a healthy young man does not. But what's very important and very exciting and is giving us a lot of confidence in moving forward into developing this as a true clinical assessment tool, is that Larry came back to me 5 weeks after his knee surgery, and I tested him the same way with the same model. And as you can see, Larry now is 58% like a normal walk and only 52% like an arthritic. What that's telling me is that Larry improved after surgery at 5 weeks almost 40%. This was the objective of the project. Can we measure with a very specific number how somebody improved after a therapy based on how they move? Larry was in a lot of pain. When he was walking before the surgery, he was walking like this, compensating. Yes, you can see that he is not walking normal. The question is not, can you see it? The question is, can you measure it? How can you measure that difference? And what we proposed was that just using an iPhone and some software, we could measure how he improved after surgery. Jeff here, he was a very interesting person. He looked completely normal when he walked, yet he had a very strange number on the arthritic, a little too high. I asked Jeff, why aren't you scoring as a healthier person? And he told me a surprise. He said, I have an inner ear balance disorder, and you may not see clearly that I'm not walking straight, but I'm oscillating a little bit because I have a balance problem. So our model was even able to be sensitive to what seemed like a healthy person, but that person actually had a problem with balance. So then one more experiment. I have identical twin girls at home, and since they were born, I have been doing experiments on them. Because when you have identical twins, you have a control and a treatment. And so on the left, we have Amelia, and on the right, we have Isabella. And they've been very good scientific partners in my career. And what happens is that they both have a disease, an autoimmune disease, probably related to my arthritis, that causes swelling and inflammation in their connective tissue in their joints. One twin has a much more serious case than the other. Just because you have the same genes does not mean they will express the same. And this is one of those situations. So the experiment was quite simple. I would provide them with the monitor. I would ask each of them to walk 3 times for 10 to 15 seconds, but not tell me who walked in what order, who walked when. So we were really doing a blind study to see whether the algorithm that was based on my walk, my arthritis, could actually be useful with a pair of young girls, one of them who had an orthopedic issue, an autoimmune orthopedic disease. So the girls were very kind. They did the experiment, and when it was over, they gave me the data, and I started to examine the data. Now remember, I don't know who is who. My job is to use the math, to use the model, to try to predict which girl walked when. I think I need, right. So, the first thing one can do is look at the raw data, because I wanted to see what the actual numbers coming from the machine look like. Here's an example of gyroscope data. Now, the gyroscope data basically means this. What kind of oscillation are we seeing away from the vertical? And what's absolutely clear here is that there are 2 groups, 2 clusters. One cluster where the oscillation is quite significant, and the other cluster where it's much less. So I thought, okay, perhaps this is distinguishing the two girls, because each walked 3 times. But this is just the gyroscope. If we look at the accelerometer, it's not so clear. Here now we're looking at motion, not oscillation, but rather motion in X, Y, and Z planes in terms of speed and movement. So in terms of acceleration, they're more similar. And it was a little hard to distinguish 2 different groups. But you can sort of say maybe this one and these 2 might be similar. Here's the point. When looking at so many parameters together, moving through time, the patterns can become very complicated. And this is why the software can be used to look for those patterns and associate those patterns with what it has learned from a test subject, that is me. So here's the problem. Can a middle-aged male with psoriatic arthritis use his walk to create models that can identify orthopedic problems, pain and discomfort, in any number of people, including children? The question is, do models generalize? Can we create one model and use it for many purposes? Well, the answer is yes and no, and let me address that here. All right, unfortunately, that slide's not showing up, so I'll speak to it. In the first cluster, based on the gyroscope data, I'll try to interpret here the numbers. You can see in the green, 51, 65, and 55, like a normal walk. Then you can see 41, 35, and 45, like an arthritic walk. What does that mean? The software was not able really to determine whether that set of 3 walks was arthritic or not. It fell somewhere in the middle with a little bit towards healthy. So when I looked at this, I could not decide which twin this was. So at the moment, I'm thinking the algorithm is not very good, and maybe using me as an example is not very good for trying to understand whether there's this autoimmune joint problem in these girls. So let's look at the second cluster. Again, I will interpret. 98% normal, 98% normal, 97% normal, and on the arthritic side, 2, 3, and 3. I immediately thought this must be the healthy twin, and I was right. So when it comes to a normal, level, straight walk, we can generalize. We can generalize across from a male to a little girl. Basically, a normal walk means minimal oscillation and translation through space. Where we cannot generalize necessarily is to say whether she, the girl with the enthesitis, is more like an arthritic or not. What that means is that if we want to learn about a specific disease, we will need to use people who have that disease and train models to essentially create a fingerprint for that disease. But if we only want to see how different it is from normal, we don't need to do that. Normal is 0. We can generalize very well. And as you can see here, that it was easy to tell which girl did not have any pain or discomfort when she was walking. So, in a sense, what we discovered were 2 very important lessons. It is easy for machine learning to identify behavior that is away from normal. It is more complicated to identify a specific pathology. We are working on using these techniques to identify Parkinson's disease oscillations. How can we track and monitor the progress of a Parkinson's patient by how they tremor? Multiple sclerosis. We're looking at other diseases where motion is critical. Congestive heart failure, peripheral arterial hypertension. These are all diseases where how one moves is correlated and linked to whether one is improving, whether one is not improving, or whether the medicine or therapy they are on is helping. We have multiple now projects going on where we're taking not the iPhone, but we've developed a clinically validated, robust sensor. And the value is not the sensor. The value really is the power of the analytics here and how we can use one sensor to generalize. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on these conclusions and talk a little bit about where we are going with this technology. One of the more interesting opportunities that came up was in a project related to managing how people become addicted to opioid drugs. Opioid addiction is a huge problem in the United States. There are many people trying to figure out how to address this issue. You may know that one of the more powerful opiates on the market is fentanyl. Fentanyl can be delivered in a patch, a little Band-Aid where the drug is in the patch and is delivered transdermally. One of the ideas that we had is to take this work that we've done here and imagine putting a motion sensor in a fentanyl patch. The physician prescribes the patch to the patient, let's say for lower back pain. And lower back pain can be characterized by very specific compensations in upper body movement. Well, if that model exists on the sensor and the patch has the drug, after 1 week, let's say, of wearing the patch and being dosed with fentanyl, those data can be uploaded to a secure physician portal. And let's say the patient calls the doctor and says, I would like another patch. I'm in great pain. The doctor can look on the portal, he can examine the results of the motion analysis and the model, exactly like I showed you with my twins, and that, or even the knee, the gentleman who improved after 5 weeks in knee pain. And the clinician can make the decision based on the evidence from the sensor, your motion is consistent with a significant decrease in lower back pain. And the person says, no, I'm in a lot of pain. So before another fentanyl patch is prescribed automatically, there's a check. There's a check where a computer said that person may be improving. So before automatically prescribing the patch, they should see the physician and confirm that they do need it. This is a remarkable ability to use simple sensor technology as essentially a check on the patient, a check whether they need a potentially dangerous drug in the sense of that they may become addicted to that drug. And finally, like I said in the beginning, a check to see if the drug is working. So there's one example where simple technology with sophisticated machine learning can be used already in a system where drugs are delivered transdermally through a patch, and we can use that to monitor the patient. Other examples include, as I've mentioned, diseases where tremors and trembling occur. So models can be built for patients with Parkinson's disease, for example. And we can monitor the progression of their disease, and we can monitor the efficacy of any treatment that's being given. And again, not with a very complicated, expensive setup of multiple sensors and a lot of technology. We're talking one sensor in a conveniently applied form, and whether those data are real-time or in burst or batch mode really depends on how frequently you want to monitor that patient. So, I will finish up now. Our objective. The objective was to see not whether motion sensors can monitor human behavior. Of course they can. That's been done for years. We also wanted to see whether using a single sensor, a commercially available sensor, was powerful enough to detect what we needed to detect for clinical assessment. And we also wanted to discover whether using sophisticated algorithms of machine learning, we could take data from one sensor and make very important decisions from a clinical perspective as to whether, for example, people were or were not in pain. I'm working with a children's pain center in the US. How difficult it is to ask a child, how much pain are you in? Do you feel better today than you did yesterday? We're looking at using this technology to actually measure pain in children so that it can be better communicated to their doctors with a simple, non-invasive test. So with that, what I hope I demonstrated was that one can very quickly, in a matter of 1 or 2 weeks, take an idea, get some technology, test it, do some good math on it, and produce very, very valuable results. The objective was to build a minimally viable prototype. That prototype was built. It proved to be quite good at what we were hoping for it to do. We learned what we can generalize and what we cannot generalize. We learned what diseases we'll need to study specifically versus not. And with that now, we have many opportunities to address very specific problems using this basic technology. So with that, I first thank you for your patience in listening to me in English. I'm very grateful, and I hope that maybe something today stimulated your curiosity and stimulated your interest, and maybe you learned a little bit about how these machine learning and all these big words, what they really mean, and how they can be practically used to improve the health of people. So with that, thank you very much.
Contamos aún con un espacio de 10 minutos para preguntas y respuestas. Les solicitamos levantar la mano y nuestro personal de apoyo les acercará el micrófono. We have 10 minutes for Q&A.
Question there?
Hola, mi nombre es José. Mi duda es respecto a tu investigación, si tienes considerado el patrón o las creencias del cerebro cuando traes algo puesto, algo externo a ti, que te hace caminar diferente a veces. Estar pensando en que traigo algo.
I will need a translation. I'm sorry.
Okay.
He says that.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I understand the question, it's related to pain and how pain is understood, yes? That
No.
it's not just physical, it's also mental.
Yes, but the idea that you have something outside of you
Yes.
and the idea that you have inside, that thinking.
Okay, if I understand it. So one of the ideas that gave us confidence in the results was it's very hard to fake
Okay.
or to manipulate how your body compensates for pain.
Okay.
It's very hard to do that. And we could see somebody would try, and eventually after some meters, they would go into a pattern.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to say the body, it's hard for the body to lie, if I can say that.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, there's a...
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
I think my question relates to the previous question, meaning that can the sensor can identify when a person is faking a walk just to get like painkillers?
Absolutely. We gave this a great deal of thought, and I think it's a similar answer.
Yes.
We found, I'll repeat this, but I'll explain it a little more. It was very difficult for a person to maintain a consistent walking behavior that was not natural. So you're sampling at so much time, and you're collecting very, very fine information. And I would fake my walk, try to fake it, and the computer knew when it was real and when it was fake. Because the real has a very consistent, periodic, very stable oscillation. The fake is not so stable because your mind is trying to control it. So again, to the gentleman's question, it's very hard for the body to lie. And at first you can try, but after a few meters, you just automatically fall into how it hurts.
Okay, thank you.
But this was really our main objective. Can you measure how much pain or discomfort a person is in? And by measure, can you put a number on it? Yeah, I don't know how many times I have been to physicians and I've been asked, are you better today, or does it hurt less? That's such a difficult question to answer. Maybe it seems better. Wouldn't it be great if in the office a very simple test that only takes a few seconds say, yeah, you're walking better. That's the objective, really. So, more questions? I was hoping to have a live demo and to select volunteers, but since I'm not a physician, I didn't want to get in trouble by making diagnosis, so we decided no live demo. But I will tell you this, one more, since I have a minute. There's another application of this technology that my colleague is working on. In the US right now, many states are making marijuana, recreational marijuana, legal. There is no field sobriety test for marijuana intoxication. Let me repeat that. There's no way to pull somebody over in a car and test them to see whether they are intoxicated by THC. Alcohol, yes, you can breathe and you can measure ethanol. There is no field test. So we held up a test first based on sobriety and ethanol, and then on marijuana. So my colleague has developed an algorithm that if you put the sensor on your shoulder and do this for 20 seconds, he will tell you how drunk you are. Very specifically, because of how your head is oscillating. We also believe that the oscillation from ethanol is different from marijuana. And we need to find a state where marijuana is legal and conduct research and ask for volunteers and basically have them intoxicated and then stand there for 20 seconds and measure their oscillation. And we are actually talking to police officials where this could be used by police. They would just put a sensor on you, tell you to lean back and stand there, and the sensor would light up green or red to tell you whether you're past some level. All based on oscillation of the body vis-a-vis the interference that the drug is having with your nervous system and your balance system. So many, many applications. I didn't talk about that work, but because it's not finished, nobody is brave enough to do the test. But with the alcohol, we did. Okay, so with that, I think we may have a minute, but if we don't... there's another question.
Les pedimos a las personas que tengan preguntas se acerquen al pasillo central, que es donde se encuentra el micrófono. Gracias. Esta sería la última pregunta.
Buenas tardes.
Señor?
Oh.
Thank you. Okay. It's just a comment. With your response, I can think that your invention can give us a conscience about our body. Just a conscience. Just some things that we don't know. That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. And of course, the goal was speed. Oh, one more.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First of all, my name is Benito Orozco. Congratulations for your work. I think it's fantastic. Are you considering to implement your algorithm with another kind of phone, not only in an iPhone?
So the algorithm actually is independent of the iPhone. Yeah, so if you have, and this is actually what's so wonderful about what we did, we wanted to make it as easy and as open as possible. So the iPhone uses the same IMU, inertial momental unit chip, that almost everybody does. And that chip has a common language that it talks in terms of how it senses and sends out the data. And so all the Fitbits and all the running stuff and the bicycling stuff, it's all using the same technology, and it's just creating some software in the front to talk to the chip to pull that data off. And what we're doing is we're agnostic and independent of the source. It can be anything. But as long as it's giving you gyroscopic and accelerometer information, which everything does, the iPhone was easy because it already had a battery. There was already software to transmit the data. It was just easy. But it could be any device. And there are many, many companies now developing clinically validated motion sensing technology for clinical applications. I'm not trying to compete with those companies. What I wanted to do is I wanted to put a smarter brain inside of that chip. A brain that knows arthritis from ischiosis. A brain that knows I'm drunk or I'm stoned. That's my goal. My goal is to have the machines learn something and then put it in that device. It's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agradecemos la participación de nuestro conferencista y a continuación el doctor Víctor Hugo Gorja le hará entrega de un reconocimiento por su participación.